Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a rare item collector wins a valuable antique at an auction that has ties to the spiritual world. So, no matter what you do, please don't finish the 3,000-piece chimeric challenge puzzle.
I'm what's called a set collector. I find and restore sets of vintage auctionables and sell them as complete sets for high-end clients. I originally came out to Lewisburg to put a bid on a near-complete set of original The Phantom comics. The collection was about a dozen short, but none of the missing issues were that rare. It was a slam dunk. It might take some time to get them graded, but if I could find a serious buyer, that wouldn't be a problem. I won the bid and was ready to call it a day when they announced a surprise item. These are always good. A complete 1923 Chimeric Challenger. 3,000-piece puzzle. Holy shit. For those not in the know, the Chimeric Challenger is famously misprinted. They were discontinued because the cutting machine had some kind of malfunction. Some pieces were stuck together and had to be cut with scissors to be assembled. Others were just plain wood, completely missing the print. Some had entire segments missing from the box. It was a commercial failure, specifically because there were seemingly no complete sets. So to have a complete 3,000-piece Chimeric Challenger, their largest and final creation, that's big money. I got it for $2,600. I've seen incomplete sets go for about $8,000, so I could probably get past $15,000 if I could find the right collector. The only problem was that while the previous owner insisted that it was complete, there was no certificate. So I would have to put it together just to verify. Honestly, I was way more excited about the Chimeric Challenger than my Phantom set. It was good money, but this was unique, rare, an actual challenge to put together and put into the hands of the right person. I got back home. I was greeted by my wall of collectibles, amassed from years of digging through countless yard sales and storage units. My crowning achievement was a vintage Mickey Mouse pocket watch placed under a little glass dome, lit with a mild yellow RGB light. The thing wasn't that rare or expensive, but it was special to me. It was the exact watch my mom hadn't been able to afford me for my 6th birthday. It represented everything I'd grown into. Someone who found things. Someone with the confidence and means to get what I want. I pulled a half-nighter finding the missing Phantom issues. By 4 a.m., I'd found all but 2, and those were just standard issues from the 80s. A bit tricky to find a seller, but dirt cheap. I just had to find the right shop, and yet I could barely get any sleep. I was so excited to get started with the Chimeric Challenger. I put out my white cotton gloves, set my alarm for 8, and put a timer on my coffee maker. As soon as that bell rang, I'd shoot out of bed like a boxer ready for round 1. As I closed my eyes that night, a single thought itched to the back of my mind. I didn't have the slightest idea what was printed on the puzzle. After a few hours of twisting and turning, I was finally standing next to the box with a steaming cup of coffee ready to go. I put on my headset and gave my West Coast guy, Lenny, a call. He was usually up at night, chatting with some of his East Asian clients. He picked up on the first signal.
What you got?
"Got," he answered. "You know any puzzle people, Lenny?" I asked. "High-end."
Are we talking Rachel Page stuff, collector shit, curios?
"Curios?" "I sent you a picture." The Chimeric Challenger came in a plain wooden box with a simple company logo on the side. The logo, a sunflower print, had faded to a shade of gray, a far cry from the original azure blue.
You Challenger?
Challenger?
He asked.
How many missing?
Many missing.
Shut up.
Shut up.
No.
No.
"Yeah, and check this out." I sent him another picture. This time of the side of the box, where you could kind of tell the number 3,000 from the remaining print. Again, faded to a gray.
And you're telling me you got a full set? 3,000 pieces?
3,000 pieces.
You got it verified?
You got it verified?
Gonna put it together, I sighed. But yeah, it's a...
You haven't checked it?
You haven't checked it?
Look, you can't throw around complete set before you get it verified. These things are notorious.
These are notorious.
I'm asking you to keep your beady weasel eyes open.
I'll call you a dumbass for not verifying it if that's what you want.
If that's what you want.
serious. This is big league collector stuff. Minnesota.
And if you get it verified, I'll shower you with roses.
You with roses.
Lenny hung up and I got to work. I took pictures of the box in every angle, noting the company address on the bottom right. Tomskog, Minnesota. Original print. I put on my cotton gloves and carefully opened the box. There were 30 identical plastic bags inside, each numbered to contain 100 pieces. Unfortunately, the seal was already broken. That probably set me back a couple of thousands. I photographed everything and opened the first bag. I went through all the pieces slowly and carefully. I double-checked them for bad prints and weak tabs. Putting it together would be the last thing I did. It took me roughly 4 hours to get to the 1,000 piece mark. So far, so good. I hadn't put the pieces together yet, but I saw some rough shades of blue, black, white skin, and a hammer. I got the impression that it was a portrait, possibly of a worker. Maybe a factory worker? I could see something rough and metallic, possibly a printing press. I saw some kind of denim texture. I spent all day checking the rest of the pieces, sending updates to Lenny along the way. The thing was pristine. Not a single wobbly tab or weak print. These pieces had probably never been properly assembled. By 9 p.m., I was completely done. Every piece checked, verified, and returned to their plastic bags. They were all perfect. Well, as perfect as a 100-year-old puzzle could be. Now I just had to put it together to make sure there were no misprints in context. There could be some kind of mix-up that I'd missed. By the end of the night, Lenny told me he had a potential buyer. They were only interested in a complete set, so I had to put it together to make sure. But if it was legit, we were looking at an $18,000 to $19,000 payout, plus commission fees. The next day, I ordered the final issues of The Phantom and got ready to put the puzzle together. I put on an audiobook, uploaded all my pictures from the previous day, and got to work. Now, putting together a 3,000-piece puzzle takes time. If I spent all day working on it, about 12 hours, it'd still take me several days to finish. Probably another day since I had to be careful about the pieces. So I cracked my knuckles, turned off all notifications, and zoned out. Around lunchtime, I'd put together a few edge pieces and a dozen pieces showing a hand holding a hammer. A dirty, labor-roughened hand with black nails and deep blue bruises around the knuckles. I took a short break. I covered the pieces with a cotton cloth and made myself a sandwich. The Phantom collection was basically complete. So I put some feelers out looking for a buyer. I found the final issues and placed an order. Most of the time, my collections don't come to me complete. The Chimeric Challenger was a bit different that way. Usually I had to track down missing pieces or incomplete sets. That was part of the job. Having it served to me like this felt like cheating. As I got back to the puzzle, I got the sense that something was different. I removed the flowery cotton cover, taking in the smell of the old wood. I could have sworn I'd only put 12 pieces together for the arm. And yet, there were 13 connected pieces. Strange. When you solve puzzles, you start with the edges. That was my strategy too, but I couldn't keep myself from assembling whatever random pieces I found along the way. Mostly background pieces showing parts of shelves and metal flooring. Long after the sun had set, I tore myself away from the puzzle. I put the cotton cover back, chugged a Red Bull, and double-checked my socials. I had a lot of missed calls. Missed calls are often missed opportunities. I couldn't afford those, but this had to get done. I spent another few hours rifling through offers, tips, and various rumors. Apparently, there'd been some talk about the Chimeric Challenger. Maybe Lenny asking around stirred something up. I went through every post about it. The consensus was clear. There were no complete Chimeric Challenger sets. A few of them had managed to put together complete sets by combining boxes, but that only worked for the 100 and 500-piece sets. The 3,000-piece sets were all unique, one poster said. That's why they didn't spoil the picture on the box. It was a collector's item. I was just about to click on a link when I heard a sound. It sounded like a click, but it didn't come from my mouse. Instead, I looked over at the covered puzzle. I walked over to it, scratching my eyes. I just stood there, looking at the flowery print of the cotton cover. Had I really heard something, or was it just sleep deprivation? Even if I'd heard something, what made me think it came from the puzzle? But no. I wasn't that person anymore. I was confident. I got what I wanted. I removed the cover and counted the assembled pieces. Edges looked fine. No problem there. But the hand with the hammer? 14 pieces, not 13. I counted, recounted, and recounted again. Had it been 14 all along? I hadn't written 13 anywhere, and I was starting to doubt myself. Puzzles don't assemble themselves. I counted the pieces so many times that the image of that hand holding the hammer burned into my eyes. I wiped the sweat from my brow, reminding myself to put on clean cotton gloves the next day. "It's 14, I said out loud, putting it down on a post-it. "It is 14 pieces. Not 13, it was 14. I covered it back up. That night I slept like a rock. I dreamt about laborers, people with shovels, hammers, saws, and chisels. I dreamt about a hazy workshop full of acidic compounds, people yelling back and forth, a large man with an anchor tattooed on his forearm, a 12-year-old with a bucket, handing out cups of water poured from a hand-carved wooden ladle, the smell of oil, tar, and something sweet, a flour press making a potent dye. The workers all had blue hands, all of them, all except the foreman. He wielded a hammer. Something clicked. I woke up. I'd only been asleep for an hour, but I was shaking and wide awake. I tried going back to sleep, but there was a struggle in the back of my head. Part of me was telling me to stop being an idiot. Part of me wanted to go back to count. It had been 12 pieces. Then it was 13, then 14. It had been 13, I had to stop doubting myself. I cursed out loud and got up. This was the final time. I stomped up to the table, removed the cover, and counted. I didn't even bother to check the edge pieces. 16. There were 2 more pieces assembled, completing the hammer. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the post-it note. It clearly said 14. There was no doubt anymore. There were more pieces assembled now than earlier that night. But what the hell did that mean? I put the cloth back over the puzzle and just watched it. I must have sat there over an hour, nodding in and out of a restless sleep. At one point, I didn't know if I was awake or not. My eyes were open, but I didn't really register anything I was seeing. And there, in that dreamlike moment, I saw something move under the cotton cover, followed by another wooden click. I must have fallen asleep as I woke up hours later, still sitting in my chair. I had some missed calls, a few items that had to be sent, and a few phantom issues to pick up at the post office. And yet, I felt uneasy leaving the chimeric challenger. I tried telling myself I'd imagined it, but I couldn't fool myself. Instead, I put my hand on the cotton cloth and took a deep breath. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to count them. I didn't want there to be more. Just as I steeled myself, my phone rang. Lenny. I breathed a sigh of relief. Saved by the bell.
If this is legit, we're looking at a paycheck. Not table scraps. A fat double quarter-pounder paycheck. I can't find a single person with a complete 3,000-piece set.
Single person with a complete 3,000-piece set.
You telling...
Imagine big brown sacks with dollar signs on them and the satisfaction of proving me wrong, but you gotta verify it.
And of proving me wrong. But you gotta verify it.
Get on it.
You know it. I'll send you a
Big dollar signs like you're a cartoon villain robbing a bank.
Like you're a cartoon villain robbing a bank.
They get to work.
clear picture, Lenny. Thank you.
Get to work.
I looked up at my Mickey Mouse pocket watch. I'd earned it. I'd been sure of myself, and I made it work. This would be no different. It took me about 2 hours to finish up my chores, sent out a couple of surplus items, picked up a few of the Phantom comics, downed a box of gas station sushi, and got back home. I substituted my audiobook for rock and roll and got into the vibe. I didn't even count the pieces, I just started putting them together, sorting them by color, mouthing the words to Detroit Rock City while looking for matching boot pieces. This was work, that's all that mattered. The guy in the picture had his labor, I had mine. I kept taking progress pics to send to Lenny later. This would be another full day. I stopped for a dinner break at about 6 p.m. I heated up some canned ravioli and reviewed the pictures. It was fun just to see how far I'd come. I'd finished the entire frame and started working my way in. I'd gotten a large chunk of metal flooring in, connected to a large segment of background wall. At least 600 pieces, all in all. Then I noticed something. I went back and forth between my pictures. I tried arranging them, putting one over the other, making sure they were the same size. I couldn't get the arm to overlay. All the other pieces were fine, but not the arm with the hammer. It was as if it wasn't in the same angle from one picture to the next, as if it had moved. I looked over at the flowery claw, feeling that icy block of doubt sink back into my stomach. Without all the music, without the bravado, it was just me and this mystery. One by one, I sent the progress pics to Lenny. And as I hit send on the last one,
I got the guy.
Lenny, I started. You gotta...
The guy.
What?
The guy, a client, he's interested.
Okay, sure, but...
No, you don't understand. He's on the other line. He wants to talk.
Now?
You need a second?
Lenny, there's an issue.
Is this gonna keep us from making bank?
I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure I couldn't be. No, I don't think so.
Then you're on in 5.
There was an electronic tone, followed by 2 signals. All of a sudden, Lenny was off the line. There was a stranger on the other end. A stranger with an old, wheezing voice. I sat there, listening to him breathe for a few seconds. Clearly, a smoker.
You got the full set?
He asked. I think so, yeah. Putting it together as we speak.
Don't do that.
There was an urgency. Like he'd waited for just the right time to say it. Preparing himself. It was the clearest thing he'd said so far.
Don't do it.
He repeated.
Tear it apart.
Why would I do that?
Can't you feel it?
I looked back at the flowery cloth. Had it really moved the other night? Had the picture changed? 12 pieces. 13, 14, 16. I hadn't even counted them since. 2 dozen? 3?
They are incomplete by design, by necessity. It shouldn't be complete.
Maybe it isn't.
Make sure of it. Disassemble it, separate the pieces, and never look at it again.
I can't just... I got up from my chair, seeing the setting sun bounce off the glass dome protecting the Mickey Mouse pocket watch. I wanted this, and I was going to get it. If you want to take it off my hands, I'm sure Lenny will get you a fair price, I sighed. But if you excuse me, I got work to do.
Don't do this.
I hung up, and for the rest of the night, I didn't bother counting. I called it a day just past midnight. I face-planted into bed, leaving the playlist rolling. I'd just catch a few hours of sleep, then get back to it. I wasn't going to drag this out. This was business, and I was going to handle it. But I couldn't help myself from dreaming. Maybe the fumes from the box got to me. Maybe it was just a different, intrusive headspace. Either way, I imagined myself back in that hazy workshop. I imagined myself waking up. A man with blue hands shaking my shoulder. Our lunch break was over, and I was slacking off. I had this mind-numbing task of putting the same varnish on wooden boxes over and over and over. The smell was so strong that I couldn't even feel it anymore. There was a noise further down the hall. A hammer coming down again and again. Screams, pleading, flesh. We knew better than to stop. You didn't quit this job. No one did. I woke up to a sudden clatter, something falling onto the floor. My eyes shot open. There were puzzle pieces scattered across the carpet. And a bloody hammer. Specks of blood covered the flowery cotton cover. The hammer just lay there on the floor, clear as day. A few puzzle pieces had fallen off the table. I picked up the hammer, feeling the weight of it in my hand. A sticky handle covered in loose strands of hair. I pulled the cotton cover aside. The chimeric challenger was almost complete. The puzzle revealed a man in denim overalls, covered in cuts, bruises, and scars. The only thing missing was his head, that hadn't been put together yet. He didn't have a hammer in his hand anymore. He did, however, have colored hands. But they weren't blue like the workers I'd dreamt of. They were blood red. I'd forgotten to turn notifications back on. I had hundreds. Row after row of texts from the same number, over and over. All of them telling me to please destroy the puzzle. Burn it. Throw it away. Tear the pieces apart and just walk away. Missed calls. Offers to pay me to get rid of it. Calls from Lenny. Calls from unknown numbers. Pleading, desperate messages. The last message was sent just minutes before I woke up, asking me to please save his life. For his children's sake. For his grandchildren. And finally, an email from Lenny. No wonder he wants it that bad, Lenny wrote. He's a Tomskog native. His dad probably helped make the thing. My pulse raced. I held the bloody hammer in my hand. This was real. This wasn't a trick of the mind. There were only about 40 pieces left to assemble. No one quits the job. Enough. I picked it all up and showed it into the box, abandoning all care and common sense. I showed it all in there, bending the tabs and snapping the corners. I saw the pieces bend and break, hearing the wood snap. I forced the lid shut, put it under my arm, and left. I was going to burn it in the yard, but it was snowing outside. I decided to throw it off a bridge instead. There's this bridge not too far from where I live where the water never really freezes. I drove up there, parked, and got out. I brought the hammer. I put the puzzle down and just started smashing it with the hammer. I watched a flock of red birds take flight, frightened by the sudden noise. Finally, I heaved it all over the edge, watching the broken wooden pieces plop into the river. As the pieces sailed into the rushing water, I felt this immense sense of relief. And with that, I dropped the hammer into the river as well. The color from the broken puzzle pieces had given my hands a faint sheen of blue. I used some snow to scrub it off. I texted Lenny, telling him the puzzle was incomplete. I didn't even bother to check his response. I'd wasted so much time and money on this, but I still felt like I'd dodged a bullet, like I'd been on the cusp of something terrible. I headed home. I spent the rest of the day trying to find a buyer for the Phantom collection. I'd gained the attention of a few big names. Apparently, the rumor of me having a chimeric challenger had also gotten out. There were quite a few messages about it. I made up a copy-paste response to get rid of them. I tried my best just to get back to work, ignoring the puzzle and everything about it. I didn't want to know what had happened. I didn't want to think about it. And yet, I could still see some blue powder under my fingernails. That night, just before bed, I scrubbed myself clean. But no matter how hard I scrubbed my hands, I could still see little blue stains on my skin. Maybe it wasn't really there. That night, I could barely sleep at all. I fell in and out of consciousness, as if my body was keeping me awake. And still, I caught some snippets of another life. A life that also had blue powder on its hands at one point. I imagined people putting down their tools. Someone getting beaten to death for insubordination. The 12-year-old boy putting down his bucket of water. Finally, a hammer raised even at him. Then, a gunshot. My eyes were wide open. I sat up, letting my legs fall off the edge of the bed. I dug my toes into the carpet. I tried to calm down, to let myself rest. Then I felt something brush against my toe. Something at the edge of the carpet. A puzzle piece. It must have bounced off when the pieces fell off the table. It depicted the top of a bald man's head, with a gunshot wound in the forehead. The eyes in the puzzle piece turned to me, meeting my gaze. Glass shattered, footsteps. I hurried into my closet, hiding behind my collection of robes. I heard uneven footsteps fumble their way inside. Water dripping onto the hardwood floor in the hallway. Something metallic brushing against the wall. It was dark, but I could see the outline of it as it stepped into my bedroom. A body, broken. A man with every bone twisted by hammer blows. A wheezing, rattling breath from a vibrating tongue. The top of his head was missing. The man from the puzzle. The chimeric challenger. I held his puzzle piece in my hand. He used his hammer as a cane for the blind, feeling his way forward, brushing it against the walls. As soon as he found the bed where I'd slept, he lost his composure. He made this unearthly sound, ripping the covers and pillows into pieces, waving the hammer around with his broken limbs. He could barely stand on his ruined legs. Every step, every swing was agony. I could hear the rage and frustration bubbling up from his exposed throat, the hammer bringing down paintings, pictures, shelves, and my priceless collectible. All of a sudden, the doors to the closet were ripped from the hinges, broken fingers wrapped around my throat. I held up the final puzzle piece like a shield, hoping it would all just go away. "Take it!" I screamed. "Just fucking take it!" But there was no discussion, no thought. He just started beating me to death with that goddamn hammer. That first blow connected with my jaw, breaking it. The second hit fractured my right upper arm. It was so fast that I didn't even understand what was happening. The third hit connected with my shoulder. I didn't even realize I dropped the puzzle piece. The dark turned red, and for a moment I could feel the texture of metal flooring against my cheek. I could see the haze of the workshop. I'd tried to quit. The foreman wasn't having it. Fingers grabbing the roots of my hair, more hammer blows, my forehead burning, my head ringing, my world started spinning as my inner ear gave up. Another blow, another. I tried pleading for help, but I couldn't form words through my broken jaw. Instead, I just lay there, wheezing, just like the foreman. All of a sudden, it stopped. A hammer clattered to the ground. I saw the glass dome with my Mickey Mouse pocket watch. It was still intact, resting on my bed. I wanted this. I wanted to live. I grabbed the hammer, flipped it, and used it to drag myself across the floor. I kept losing my grip from the bleeding. But I made it. Months of physical therapy. Dozens of surgeries. And I still can't lift my arm over my head. When I stretch one way, I can feel this deep ache still lingering in my jaw. Turns out he accidentally smashed the final puzzle piece when he tried to beat me to death. I guess in a strange way, he destroyed himself. Now, I still see people looking to complete sets of the Chimeric Challenge puzzles. There are 8 auctions for various pieces going on right now. Some for 300 pieces, one looking to complete a set for a 1,000-piece puzzle. And that's why I'm asking that we please, as a community, never talk of these again.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories, straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man gets a special job for an agency of supernatural hunters. So, where have you worked? Because I worked for the Department of Unknown Crises.
Let's consider some hypotheticals. Let's say you got yourself a master's degree. Let's say that got you a job at a small branch of state government. Let's say you worked there for the better part of your early adult life. You built everything around that job. Got an apartment, moved in with your girlfriend, had an orange cat with, seemingly, a single brain cell. Life is good, right? Hypothetical. Then along comes this man. Says he works in conjunction with the federal government and the private sector. The guy reeks corporate. Got a suit with a custom cut. No labels on his clothes. Tells us that we're going to be working closely with a small department that has recently got a boost. Apparently, there's a need for expansion, and some people from my branch will be moving on up. Let's say that one of those people is me. Hypothetically. All right, I'm going to stop that. Sorry, it gets to me. You can safely presume that I've changed a couple of details to make myself less recognizable. I got to get through the filters. I had to move from Milwaukee up to Superior. Sarah and I tried to make it work, but she couldn't leave the city behind. It came down to the choice between me and the rest of her life. It made sense for her to stay. Kind of pissed that she kept the cat, though. That thing loved me. I started working at the DUC in September of 1998. At first, I didn't even know what the acronym stood for. It wasn't a matter of secrecy, but they had these stupid sayings plastered along the walls that people followed to a T. For example, water of a duke's back. This was the standard operating procedure. Don't ask too many questions. Let your questions and worries drift right off, like water off a duck's back. They displayed this proudly in the lunchroom with a picture of a duck peacefully sleeping by a pond. We worked in collaboration with other agencies in Michigan, Iowa, and Minnesota. Mostly Minnesota. I helped them develop software to codify reports of invasive ecological species. It would break down verbal reports with a bare-bones text-to-speech system, which in turn is transcribed and separated into categories. Categories were measured, analyzed, and turned into probability reports. Once information had been categorized, the most prominent reports would be sent to the department lead. Seems simple by today's standards, but back then it was cutting-edge stuff. It was November 1999 when we finalized the first version of our system, lovingly named Daisy. Hours before the launch party, the department lead took me to his office, closed the blinds, and sat quietly across from me for about 2 solid minutes. This man, the department lead, was Thomas Rubin, a 67-year-old ex-drill sergeant with a penchant for the dramatic. Kept his head as bald as his lies. Having worked there for over a year, I thought I had a foot in the door by then. Turns out I was still on the outside, and until that very moment. Thomas poured me a shot. Mint schnapps.
To a job well done.
He said, raising his glass. I accepted the invitation and downed the shot. What the hell, right?
Do you have recurring nightmares, Adonin?
He asked.
Seeing something strange at night? Those last few hours before the sunrise, do the shadows gain a peculiar tint?
No, sir.
You're not a very haunted man, are you?
I am not, sir.
I can work with that.
He poured me another drink.
I can get you working on the real deal,
He said.
but you're not going to like it. You're not going to like it one bit. That sound like a party to you?
I took the glass and studied it. Little sugar crystals swirling around, backlit from a lone computer screen. I downed the second shot, and Thomas smiled.
Imagine a lighthouse,
He said,
and whenever someone thinks about the lighthouse, it lights up. You with me so far?
yes, sir.
And this lighthouse draws in all kinds of things from far and wide. Traders, smugglers, warships, everything. But you don't want that. The beach is closed and these ships are bad news. What do?
We turn off the lighthouse, sir.
Ah, but it comes right back on whenever someone thinks about it, even when you do it.
We demolish the lighthouse, sir.
Same thing, pops right back once you think about it. Try again.
We forget about it, sir.
You can't unknow something.
Then you'd have to go after the people that know about it. And you'd have to be careful not to learn anything about it yourself,
And that's what we do.
said Thomas.
We turn off the lighthouses.
Thomas elaborated over the course of 3 more shots. What he was describing was an invasive ecological agent, something that literally grew from the ground. Its very presence acts as a sort of go-ahead for other, more dangerous entities. But thinking about it too much causes it to appear. Not immediately, but slowly over time. The more you knew and the more intimate your knowledge about it was, the stronger the connection would be. I was safe, though. You had to know the details to trigger it. Thomas gave me the example of a red lily. You couldn't just know it was red or a lily. You had to know both these things to imagine it clearly. Once you did, there's a chance it starts appearing more and more in your everyday life, until it takes physical form. And by then, you've opened an express highway to something far darker and far worse. The DUC, or the Department for Unknown Crises, was founded to combat these entities in a way that doesn't endanger the general populace. We were preventative, mostly. The software we made scrubbed away all details and simply stated an address, sometimes a person, and the likelihood of there being at least one physical manifestation of the invasive species present. As the system was automated, there was no way for us to know the details. Only the computer knew. According to Thomas, there was a time when these things had been completely eradicated. Right before the start of the Second World War, there had been a concentrated effort to remove them. The methods they used was later adapted in creation of the DUC. Turns out those things can't ever be truly removed. There was an author who documented these ecological entities to such a degree that it could be used as a gateway. While he passed away in 1926, possibly as part of the containment, his diaries were discovered in the 60s. Since then, the invasive species had free rein with no one to stop them. There had been some loose efforts, mostly from the private sector, but it took the creation of the DUC to start the work on a larger scale. And there we were. From that point forward, I started to work with more specific field equipment. Since being able to imagine the object is something that triggers it to manifest, we needed a way for field agents to physically remove them without putting themselves in danger. We came up with something we called the Blur Guard, a full headset that removes all color, dampens sound, and mildly blurs your vision. Going back to the example of a red lily, the Blur Guard turned it from a red lily to some kind of flower. That's not enough detail to trigger a manifestation, and thus deemed safe. Since our software knew what to look for, we incorporated a camera and basic image recognition. There'd be a little green light showing up whenever what we were looking for was in view. From that point on, our field agents could play hot or cold until they found what they were supposed to remove. And when it came to people, well, we can't kill them or have them unlearn something. So instead, There was a targeted effort to herd them into place, where we knew this problem was prominent enough to go unnoticed. The DUC had done it for decades. These were personalized, targeted efforts. Maybe sending a particularly juicy job offer, enticing a target to move, things like that. We focused on 2 main sites, a rural town in Minnesota and one in West Virginia. There were talks of one up in New England, but that was a separate department. These places have been absolutely scrubbed. To this day, you can't even find them on a map. Our colleagues in the private sector bought out pretty much everything there is to own, giving the DUC close to full control. It might seem cruel, but most of these people had no idea that they'd been manipulated. They lived good lives. We did our best to turn off as many lighthouses as we could, but in a town like that, some were bound to pop up eventually. Let's skip ahead a couple of years. In the summer of 2004, I had been on rotation assisting with the development of new equipment. I was also regularly updating both Daisy and the Blur Guard. We had implemented generalized search filters, looking for the trigger words that Daisy could use, increasing our information input tenfold. Hell, about 90% of forum infrastructure could be breached to censor descriptions of the invasive agents if needed. We had basic bots prowling most major discussion forums to contain eventual spread. One night I'd taken my work home with me to work on a camera light. Some field agents had mentioned image recognition issues in low-light areas where the camera refused to work, so I figured an extra light source would go a long way. I was blasting my work time playlist on my laptop, sipping on my second rum and coke. If I was going to do extra work from home, I might as well make an event out of it. Just short of midnight, it was time to try it out. I turned off the lights, put on the helmet, and checked to see if the camera light auto-activated as instructed. It did. Strange thing, though. I was getting a green marker. The helmet was recognizing the invasive element right in front of me. I know my own apartment top to bottom, so I know exactly what I was looking at, blurred helmet or no. I'm obviously not going to describe it to you, but it had the appearance of a household plant, quite large. I'd had it in my window for years. For the sake of storytelling, let's call it a red lily, like in Thomas's example. Suddenly it dawned on me. Now I knew what the invasive agent was. I couldn't unlearn it. From that point forward, I was going to be a threat to the department. This was an invitation for red lilies to pop up out of nowhere, possibly making everyone aware of them. But first and foremost, they'd be a lighthouse for other things to come. I pulled the lily out of the pot, roots and all, and shoved it down the garbage disposal. I swear, the damn thing screamed. The empty pot was left on the windowsill. Moments later, my phone rang. Turns out my Blur Guard was actively connected to the Daisy system. It had probably sent out a report to the department lead with my name and address the moment it recognized the species. I held my breath, trying to calm down. This was going to spark a series of events. There'd be a report, an investigation. I'd most likely lose my job and be forced to relocate. No, worse. This was unprecedented. As expected, the call came from Thomas.
What's going on?
He asked. I'm working on the internal camera light. I think there's a malfunction.
We got a positive match on your location.
I know. It's not a big deal. It's nothing,
We're going to stick to protocol on this one,
said Thomas.
Expect 3 field agents on site within 15 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
I pulled my hair. My hand wouldn't stop shaking. I usually get the shakes when I'm losing control. I figured I'd better remove all traces of the plant, whatever parts were stuck in the garbage disposal, and whatever remained in the pot. Except when I looked back up, there was another red lily growing from the pot, almost exactly the same, like it had never left. I can't stress this enough. You can't unlearn things. You can't unremember something. I tried not to think about it, but that just made me think of it more. I fetched a Rubik's Cube from my desk to focus on something else, but as soon as that color showed up, my mind sank back to thinking of it. I got a garbage bag and threw the whole pot in along with the rest of the garbage. There'd be nothing left. I went room by room, looking for anything remotely resembling it, but there was nothing. So I left the apartment, intent on throwing it all away. But see, there's this communal garden project outside my apartment building. It was filled with these things. There were dozens of red lilies. My mind blanked, and I could feel my pulse rising in my throat. This entire neighborhood could be compromised. Possibly more. I couldn't for the life of me remember if the lilies had been there earlier that day, or if it was a reaction to my realization. These things were insidious. They not only appear when you think about them, but they make a conscious effort to pop up when they are least expected, or wanted. I called my landlord, Jerry, and started pulling up lilies from the community garden with my free hand. Some of them screamed. It was like a tiny wail from a baby. Some of the lilies clung to the dirt, digging their roots deeper. Others came willingly. One of them withered in my hand, giving up completely. When Jerry finally picked up, I was out of breath. I need to ask about the communal garden project, I said. I work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's a bit of an invasive species growing here, and I need to establish a time frame as to when they appeared.
All right.
The red lilies, the community garden lilies, they're actually a dangerous and invasive species. Do you have any idea how long they've been here?
Red lilies? Oh, yeah. We've had those for a while.
How long? There was a silence on the other end. Maybe he was thinking about it. I didn't have that kind of time. How long, Jerry?
Look, I don't know. 8, maybe 9 years?
I grabbed my hair and pulled. The pain in my scalp forced me to concentrate. A handful of hairs gave way. Thanks, Jerry. If you see these, throw them away. Immediately.
I'll do that.
And don't tell anyone. We don't want to alarm people. I hung up. I was flailing, breaking protocol left and right. I was a breach waiting to be sealed. I was on my knees in the dirt, pulling up red lilies by the handful. One of my neighbors walked past, and I could hear her dog whining at the sight of me. Or maybe it saw something I didn't. There was no telling what this would mean. Most breaches we'd encountered was 1 or 2 of these things. At most, they were usually contained to the Minnesota side of the operation. Them having skipped the state line and latching onto me was alarming. This could prompt a whole new level of response. I knew Thomas had a level black response where termination of lives would be necessary to contain the threat, but we'd never employed it. Not yet. But looking around me and running the numbers, this might be it. This could be the first time they'd have to kill people, and I'd be the first in line. The field agents would be there at any moment. My hands were red and raw from pulling up lilies and stuffing them into the garbage bag. I was so frantic that I grabbed everything that even remotely resembled them. Anything red, anything lily-shaped. I tore up more than half the community garden in 10 minutes flat. I could hear a car coming. Couldn't take any chances. I looked over the garden again, couldn't see any of them, and sprinted to the garbage cans. The moment I had thrown it all away, I saw headlights turning the corner. I recognized them. I brushed my hands off the best I could and shoved them in my pockets. A white hatchback with government license plates pulled up, and 3 people got out. I tried to stay calm. I tried not to think about red lilies. I tried to smile. I could tell that I was looking at Agent Estevez, Young, and Owens. I'd worked with these people plenty of times to prep them for excursion. Never to this extent, though, and never on this side of the states. They all fixed and activated their blur guard helmets.
Rough night?
Asked Estevez. Yeah, I nodded. Working on an update. The helmet kind of,
Sure. We'll just check out the apartment and be on our way. You mind waiting down here?
No, that's fine. They turned on their image recog, synced their comms, and gave me a pat on the shoulder.
We'll be in and out,
Said Young.
Sorry about the trouble.
I watched them ascend the stairway while I stayed out by the garden. I was going to make sure nothing popped up. If the agents just up and left, I could come up with a plan. I'd tell Thomas eventually, but I had to be clever about it. I had to assess the damage and spread to make sure I could trigger a quarantine rather than an eradication-level response. Still, looking around the apartment complex, there were probably hundreds of people living there. These things could have made their way into every single household, opening the way for pretty much anything. Not that I had the slightest idea of what that might be. I was lost in thought for the better part of half an hour. What the hell was taking them so long? Had they found one? I walked up the stairway and put my hand on the apartment door. It was quiet. It shouldn't be quiet. I got this sinking feeling, like my body heat was leaking out of my feet. My mind started to race with possibilities. Maybe they left, went to the wrong apartment. Maybe they were watching TV on my couch, having a beer, burning a red lily in the tub. Whatever they did, they wouldn't do it quietly. And this was quiet. I pushed the door open and was met with a chemical smell, like a moist mix of methanol and iron. It was strong enough to taste. "Estevez?" I coughed out. "You guys okay in there?" No response. I stepped back out, gasping for fresh air. The smell burned my nose hairs. My eyes teared up as I tried not to sneeze. I didn't want to go back in. I knew it was bad. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Still, I didn't have a choice. I stepped back in and shut the door behind me. I turned on the lights. They'd been torn to pieces. There was blood dripping from the ceiling. 2 severed arms on the kitchen table. An armless, legless torso resting on the couch, the blood sinking into the cracks in the leather. The floor was covered in gore, torn straight from their bodies and left in the open. Muscle, sinew, vital organs, all splayed out on the floor and furniture. There was a single red lily in a brand new pot, resting on the windowsill. There was a bright red handprint on the bathroom door. I gently pushed the door open, only to reveal the severed heads of Estevez, Young, and Owens, unceremoniously thrown into a pile on the floor of my shower cabinet. I don't know how long I stood there. My mind went completely blank. I could honestly not tell if it was real or a nightmare. For a moment, I was awash with this intense relief. It had to be a nightmare. It didn't make sense for something so terrible to happen so suddenly. It took me a while to realize that there was something looking at me from the bathroom mirror. I turned to it. My face wasn't there, just a dark space where my face ought to be. It was like staring into a hole, vaguely shaped like a humanoid. It followed my movements as I leaned my head left and right. We looked at one another in silence, hearing only the blood dripping from the living room ceiling. A trembling whisper burrowed into my spine. Hello. This was one of the things Thomas had warned us about. This was one of the ships that came to shore following the lighthouse. One of the countless entities invited into my world. Drawn in by this thing. That thing that ought not to be. I hate calling it a red lily. I want to scream what it is and have them torn apart, but I can't describe them, or they'll spread out of control. The longer I stared at the thing in the mirror, the more I understood. It was one thing to know about the red lilies. It was 100 times more potent to know exactly how they worked. For an average person to know their appearance might invite a few to pop up, but to know them at the level that I did, that was an entirely different league. To these things, I was precious cargo. I could light 100 lighthouses, 1,000. They perceived Estevez and the other agents as a threat and disposed of them immediately. I was the equivalent of a carrier. Patient zero. I was stuck in the eye of the storm, and everything around me would be torn to shreds. I ran 100 scenarios in my mind. Destroying myself was the obvious choice, but that would be the nail in the coffin that would force Thomas to take violent action on this entire apartment complex. Without context, he wouldn't know how to contain it. Losing personnel was the final criteria for a black level response. However, if it was attributed to a breach of protocol or faulty equipment, I could bring it down to a quarantine. There was hope, but I had to explain it. I had to stay alive. As I pondered my options, I heard a running motor outside. I stepped out of the bathroom and out onto the walkway. Another 2 white hatchbacks had pulled up. I'd lost track of time. No one in Estevez's team had reported an all clear or anything. This had prompted a standard backup response. If these teams found traces of anything, our entire field division would be called in. They'd probably put people all the way down in Des Moines on high alert within the next 15 minutes if there was no de-escalation. There were already new red lilies growing in the community garden. They wouldn't let me talk. Talking was a hazard, since I could verbally describe what they were looking for. I could yell out, "They look like red lilies," and the entire squad would be compromised. Up until this point, we'd never had to worry about that kind of willful exposure, and there was no plan for it. The DUC didn't have enemies in the active sense. We were preventative. There was no way they'd let me talk or leave. Not with 3 human remains in my apartment. At best, they'd gag me, burn this place to the ground. At worst, they'd shoot, and then do the same. I scurried along the walkway, turning left at the far end. I took the fire escape to the ground floor, hugged the wall of the building, and circled back to the parking lot. I burst into a sprint for my sedan. Luckily, no one noticed. At least no one that cared. As soon as I got on the highway, I called Thomas. I had trouble staying in my lane. My hands kept cramping up. Thomas picked up. I could hear him opening a door, putting on a jacket.
You gotta tell me what's going on.
He said,
Where are you?
I had to go. I had to. The place is infested.
So, let's deal with it.
I didn't know what to say. There was no good place to start. I leaned back in my seat, tried to keep the car straight, and took a deep breath. There were flashes of red by the roadside. Could have been red lilies. The back seat was dark enough to hide a possible shape. I thought I saw an outline in the rearview mirror, but it might have been my mind playing tricks.
Stay where you are. I'll have someone pick you up and we'll deal with it.
I can't, I said. It's bad, Thomas. It's real bad.
How bad are we talking?
We're talking, quarantine. Breach of protocol. At least 3 casualties. Thomas took a deep breath. He held the line for a few seconds. I could hear him get into a car.
You know, don't you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
They're everywhere. I can't stop seeing them.
Don't tell me anything. Nothing. I shouldn't be talking to you.
He was right. Talking to someone like me who knew was like trying to pet a rattlesnake. It could all be over in a snap.
We gotta bring you in.
What are you gonna do?
Did we lose people?
Esteva's team, I said. Yep, something came through.
Jesus Christ, are you saying you're causing manifestations?
I don't know.
But you do know. You, if anyone knows, so tell me.
Looking back in the rearview mirror, I knew there was something riding along. Something that had caught on to me. Something that had stepped into our world, following the light of the red lilies. There was no point in denying it. I'll figure it out, I said. I'll deal with it. Before Thomas got the chance to object, I turned off my phone and chucked it out the window. I drove for the better part of an hour before a familiar sound snapped me to attention. Whatever surface-level plans I'd made in my head dissolved completely. I heard the sound before I saw the flashing lights. A siren. I was probably swerving left and right, trying to keep the car straight. No wonder I was being pulled over. This could get real bad, real fast. I thought about booking it and hoping for the best, but that'd just draw more attention to it. Instead, I found a secluded spot and pulled over. It was only as I pulled the handbrake that I remembered I'd been drinking earlier that night. I'd had about 2 rum and cokes. I'd completely forgotten about it. I tried to consider my options, but there was no time. I was told to turn off the engine, roll down the window, and place my hands on the dashboard. There were 2 officers, a man and a woman. I could barely hear them over my pounding heart. To them, it was a routine stop, but I was trying to save lives. They had no idea what kind of trouble they were in. I tried to wrap my head around it to come up with something plausible that they'd understand. I could tell them I had a bomb strapped to me or anything, but there was no time. I hadn't even heard them asking for my license and registration plate. I could feel a flashlight shine on my face, but I barely registered it. They asked me 3 times. Then, they changed tactics.
Sir, we need you to step out and place your hands on the hood of the vehicle.
I fumbled my response. There's something in the car, I said. You gotta be careful,
Sir, is there currently a weapon on your person? Something that can puncture or wound my partner? A pencil, a knife, a sharp set of keys?
No, listen, you gotta step back. There's something in... My thoughts blanked. There, by the side of the road, I saw one. A red lily, clear as day, growing through the cracks in the pavement.
Sir, I need you to cooperate with me.
The officer insisted.
Have you been drinking tonight?
I couldn't take my eyes off the red lily. It was like a reminder that this was already over. That my fate, and theirs, was sealed the moment we met. Dead men walking. Please, I whispered, let them go. For a second, I thought that might do it. I was willing to listen, to give in, if that's what it took for these people to live. The red lily knew. I know it knew. But like a lighthouse, it can't help but to shine, and to bring ships to shore. And with that, a familiar tremble rose in my stomach. H-E-L-L-O. There was a flicker as one of the light posts went out. I closed my eyes, trying to keep the tears in. The officer to my left started screaming. I heard a gunshot, but muffled, fired into something at close range. I heard fabric being torn, then flesh, then sinew and arteries. No one ever told me it was possible to discern the sound of marrow separating from breaking bone, but now I can't stop hearing it. H-E-L-L-O. Primal animalistic screams. A programmed response in our biology to alert other humans to stay away, to run. Splotches of blood rained down on the concrete and the hood of the car. I could feel something warm spatter across my face and run down my cheeks. The screams stopped. I'd sunk to my knees. I looked like a crying altar boy, praying for it all to stop. When I finally forced my eyes open, the world was red with blood. In the flicker of a dying light post, I saw something vaguely human drop the sundered remains of a torso. It followed my head movements, left to right, mimicking me. I could tell it was proud, like a dog bringing back a stick to its master. H-E-L-L-O. I stumbled to my feet, leaning against the car to steady myself. The concrete was slippery with blood, and I kept stepping on something indiscernible. I tried to look straight ahead, as to not look at the entity too closely. It was just standing there, in the middle of the street, looking at me, waiting for me to say or do something. I looked straight ahead, pretending it wasn't even there. The car took a few turns of the key to start. The steering wheel was slippery with blood, but I managed to steer back on the road. The windshield wipers smeared the gore into a thin red veneer. I had to go away, far away, and there was only one place I could imagine. As I mentioned earlier, the DUC had certain containment areas. Previously, these were spaces where they simply moved people of interest, but with me there, they'd have to leave it alone. I'd be too dangerous to interact with. They'd have to trust that I wouldn't interfere as long as I kept to myself and out of the way. I burned my car in a field and walked 9 miles. I washed myself off in a river. This was a town designed to keep people comfortable enough not to ask questions. So, having a stranger wander in off the streets wouldn't be a problem. And everywhere I looked, there were red lilies. They were in the windows of every house, by the roadside, in every garden. Hell, they were even used as a logo. I'd seen that logo 100 times. Maybe they had no idea what it meant. I've stayed in that rural Minnesota town ever since. I've seen more horrors than I dared to count, but they seem to ignore me. They treat this place as a nesting ground or staging area. Considering how many of them there is, I'm astounded that anyone is still alive. DUC has declared this entire town a hazard. I've tried getting in touch with Thomas again, but all my attempts at communication with the outside world has been censored. If this by some miracle gets through the filters, I urge the DUC to get in contact with me. I want to be an asset. I want to help turning off the lighthouses. And as for everyone else, the best thing you can do is to stop asking questions. Don't question the armed men with strange helmets. Don't look too closely at the strange plant in the community garden. Don't look for anything abnormal, and if you see something, try to consider it might be artificial. Don't dig too deep into this. If you're not involved, consider yourself lucky, and stay out of rural Minnesota.